The 2023 NHL offseason featured some massive moves, some big trades, some huge signings, but a few months later, now we have a great idea of how these big moves are working out for every NHL team. But how have the big moves from last year's NHL offseason turned out? Have they been good? Have they been bad? Well, make sure you watch till the end as we grade every single major move, and hit that subscribe button if you're new for more hockey content just like this all throughout the year. Now we're going to turn back the clock to see how all these moves have shaped up, and going on to the first really big move of this last offseason, really being the Ivan Provorov 3-team trade. Now this deal was an absolute doozy. First we were getting discussions over an Ivan Provorov trade, and that quickly turned into a 3-team deal involving Columbus, Philadelphia, and the LA Kings. But folks, this trade has been fascinating from day one and continues to get more so. For Columbus, of course, Provorov was the big piece and their only piece in the trade, and I feel like he was brought on to try to save that defense, but to me, he's played worse than he has in the past with Philly. You see this year, points-wise, he's been okay, 21 points in 39 games, and offensively, he's had some decent moments, but defensively, he's playing the worst defense of his career, which I didn't think was possible with what we saw in Philly over the past couple of seasons. He has been a brutal player on that defense, and it's not like there's too many excuses either. I mean, Zach Werenski, when he has played, has still been great defensively, still been looking amazing. Provorov has just not been good and hasn't been good for a pretty long time now. Now, with it being a 3-team trade, technically Philadelphia trade Provorov to the LA Kings and then the Columbus Blue Jackets for cap retention reasons. For the Kings, they would only acquire a couple of players, 2 AHL guys in Hayden Hodgson and Kevin Connaughton. But, you know, it wasn't about what LA was acquiring. It was about the cap hit that they were leaving off the team. For Philadelphia, they got a grand haul getting rid of Ivan Provorov and taking on a couple of players here. For the haul they ended up getting, they first got Sean Walker, who was an extra D for LA that didn't really seem like he was going to have much of a place in the future with them, but he has been brilliant for the Flyers and has been a big part of that team. Offensively, obviously the points don't strike at you. It's not amazing or anything, 12 points in 37 games, but he's been solid. The goal scoring department has been good, and he's playing the best defense of his life at the NHL level too, and has been a serviceable top 4 guy. Will likely be a trade deadline deal as well and getting a lot back. You got Cal Peterson, who's been the AHL, but again, was somebody to just be brought in for the cap reasons. Helge Grans as well, and then Philly also got a first-round pick in this deal, which they selected Oliver Bonk, 22nd overall. Brutal game against Czechia with that brutal moment in the World Juniors, but still looking decent as probably a middle pair, maybe bottom pair D. But for Philly, a lot of assets being brought back in this deal. As for the actual grades for this deal, I'm going to give Columbus a D-, LA a straight C, and for the Flyers, an A+. Philly absolutely smashed it out of the park with this deal. Next up, we go to one of the more underrated deals of the offseason that is paying pretty big dividends for the Arizona Coyotes in the Sean Durzi deal. Now, Arizona acquired Sean Durzi, a young D, and I thought it was a really interesting deal at the time for an offensive D that could hopefully get the most out of their power play, and he's been great in that role, especially on the power play. You see this year in 30 games, 6 goals, 14 assists, 20 points. Offensively, he has been as good as advertised. I think especially for Arizona, the youth was a big thing. He only turns 26 this next October, so he's going to be a part of this next generation of Arizona Coyotes. And defensively, he's not going to light the world on fire, but just as a middle pair offensive D, he's brought some really good things. And for the LA Kings, also to offload another D here that they didn't really have a lot of room for, they got Montreal's 2nd round pick in 2024, which they're obviously exceeding a little bit of expectations, but still, I think this was a fair trade for both sides. As for the grades, I'm going to give Arizona a straight A, and for LA, a straight B. Now, continuing the trade grades here, let's go on to the Alex Newhook deal between Montreal and Colorado, one that I think is looking like more of a win-win with every passing day. Now, sure, Newhook's health hasn't been amazing this year, having that injury a few weeks back, but when he was playing and was healthy for Montreal, he was one of the more effective offensive players. In 23 games, got 7 goals, 6 assists, 13 points. I thought looked good, versatile as well. And even though there were some defensive lapses, I still thought was going to be getting the job done. And with Montreal, is going to be a cornerstone middle sixer for them. As for the Avs, they ended up acquiring Giovanni Fairbrother, who's right now in the AHL, ECHL, likely not much. But they ended up getting prospects Mikhail Gulyayev, who's looking really solid in the KHL this year, Ethan Gaucher, and they ended up trading Ethan Gaucher to Tampa to get Ross Colton in a 1-for-1 deal. So when you think about it, for Colorado, they got Colton, Gulyayev, and Fairbrother for Newhook. To them, they did a very good job, and I think also for Montreal, the value was pretty solid there too. I'm going to give a trade grade here, Montreal A-, as well as Colorado an A- too. Now on to the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade, and we made a video about this deal a couple weeks back, and that was even before Gabriel Velarde really started to get going, and it's looking like even a much better trade for Winnipeg than even when I made that video. But we go into a little bit more depth into that one in that video. Still though, I think for this trade, LA will likely still come out of it decently. I think Dubois is going to step it up in this second half, so I'm going to give them a C+, but Winnipeg has the A+ all day, every day. Now let's move on to the Tyler Toffoli deal with Calgary and New Jersey, which is quickly looking like one of the bigger win-win deals of the entire offseason, in my opinion. At the time, I was definitely on the side of New Jersey, getting a player like Toffoli there, but I did like Igor Shayne, and I always have liked him. Though last year wasn't the greatest year by him by any means, but still, I thought there was solid potential there, and it's working out pretty greatly so far. Of course, with New Jersey getting Toffoli, he has been a rock star offensively like he usually is. 73 points last year, 27 points, 15 goals in 35 games this year, continues to be great, and has been really valuable for New Jersey as they've kind of struggled a little more than we expected in the first half. But for Calgary, they end up getting Igor Shayne, who at 25 years old has been pretty great. In 37 games, has 11 goals, 23 points, has really gotten hot over the last month, and is looking really underrated for them. And they also got Idar Suniev in the third round as well in this deal, who's looking solid on a UMass team that doesn't have a lot of forward options. 13 points, 7 goals in 17 games, but going to be a guy that's also developing pretty slowly, but will be probably a decent third line guy for the Flames in the future. So they got a couple of really solid options there. Honestly, I'm going to give this trade a pretty even split. A for New Jersey and an A for Calgary. Now, as I said before, we're going through the start of the offseason to the end of it, so there will still be some trades here as we go through the free agency moves as well. But one of the first big signings was Alex Killorn to the Anaheim Ducks, and if you're Killorn, there was no way you couldn't accept this offer. $6.25 million for the next 3 seasons after this. Right now for Killorn's paycheck, it is looking like an absolute bag, but at 34 years old, it's not likely to age well. It already hasn't aged very well. He was injured to start the year and has been okay offensively since he's gotten back, but nothing absolutely special. And defensively, like some of the Anaheim roster has been a little bit of a train wreck on defense. It's not looking very good whatsoever, even though I do like some of the physicality he's bringing, and obviously that veteran presence is valuable. I don't think Killorn was the guy you needed to sign, especially at that cap. It was so many young players coming in who will need new deals. I'm going to give this signing a D-. Now going on to an Anaheim signing that I think is actually a steal of a deal, and that is the Radko Gudas contract, which he signed at $4 million for 3 years, 2 years after this. But at 33 years old, unlike Killorn, he's still pretty much at the top of his game. Physically, defensively, he's as good as advertised for Anaheim and has been great in that role. A much needed, great defensive player on that D-core. He hasn't been able to save them, especially after the first couple of weeks of the season, but he's still been solid, 10 points in 32 games, and he's a player that is going to bring what he brings, and at that great level, that consistent level, and a much needed signing for Anaheim. I'm going to give the deal a straight A. Now let's go on to a deal that I was absolutely 100% wrong on, and that is the Joonas Korpisalo signing with the Ottawa Senators. This one is just looking absolutely brutal. At the time, I thought he could rebound maybe in a better, more compact situation in Ottawa, but defensively, we've obviously seen how bad and how inconsistent they have been, and it does not help Korpisalo whatsoever. He has also been one of the worst goalies in the NHL this year, and he's making $4 million for the next 4 seasons after this, which, when the time it was signed, I was like, okay, it could be an interesting bet, especially at the cap hit, which is relatively low for him, but it just has downgraded all expectations. An .889 save percentage this year, and Korpisalo, especially with that tendency to give up some softy goals, he's been about as bad as he could be with Ottawa this year, and the worst version of himself, unfortunately. I have to give this signing a straight F. There's really no other ifs and buts about it. Now going on to a contract that's looking much, much better, but not exactly a high bar. That is Michael Bunting's deal to Carolina Hurricanes at $4.5 million for the next 2 seasons. After this, he's looking solid, and I would say power play wise has been a much needed addition onto the 4 group. You see in 37 games, he has 26 points. He has a bunch of power play points, and that's really the main difference here. With Bunting, we know that Carolina needs an offensive punch. Bunting so far has been able to bring that. We'll see how much he's able to bring that, if there's some limitness at that next level in the second half. But so far, he's been so good for Carolina, and I'm going to give it a C+. Now let's go to a signing that I was pretty wrong about as well, just like the Korpisalo one, but in a better way for Detroit, and that is JT Compher. It was a deal that I was kind of unsure about if he was able to perform at that term, and then we'll still see if it will be the case. But so far, he's been really solid for Detroit in a point-getting role, also defensive role in that second line center spot. He's been great, and with Kopp not really performing up to expectations. Compher has been able to fill that role pretty perfectly. 24 points in 3 games after a breakout year last year. And I mean, Compher's just been as good as he can be. And right now in the prime of his career is giving his best with the Wings, which you love to see. Oh yeah, the grade is a straight B. Pretty solid thus far. Now we're going on to a deal that's honestly looking like one of the best of the offseason, and that is the Shayne Gostisbehere signing. $4.1 million for 1 year, but he's been brilliant with Detroit, and we talked about it a little bit earlier as well with a player like Bunting coming in, getting a lot of power play points and being great for a power play. Well, Gostisbehere had the intention of coming in as that power play guy and has been perfect in that role. You can see what he's been able to do with Carolina and Arizona in the last couple of years. Just great point production. And he's carried that over with Detroit. 27 points in 37 games. And with Gostisbehere, I'm going to give this signing an A+. Pretty great in all honesty. Now going on to another amazing free agent addition, and that is Ryan O'Reilly with the Nashville Predators, who might be the most valuable free agent addition that we saw last offseason, which is pretty crazy to think about, but I would feel like I'm pretty right on this. I was pretty bullish on Ryan O'Reilly, and especially on that deal, which was $4.5 million for the next 4 seasons and 3 years after this. But he's been great for Nashville so far. 32 points in 38 games. On the power play, he's been good. Goal scoring wise, 15 goals. He's been great there too. But even though that is great, I think that leadership and what he's been able to bring with Nashville has been one of the most instrumental things. With a lot of players like Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson going off the team in this last offseason, they need to bring not just a centerman onto the roster, but a true leader. And you see with Ryan O'Reilly just how much he's been able to do, how great he was with Toronto in the playoffs last year, and then that second half, he's been able to bring over that play of Nashville. And right now they're looking like a solidified playoff team, and you just love to see that. Or should I say, I love to see it since I predicted him to be a playoff team, and Ryan O'Reilly has been a big part of that, so I'm going to give this signing an A+. Now going on to one of the worst signings of the offseason this last year, and it has to be John Klingberg. I mean, even though Joonas Korpisalo has been brutal, you could at least see a way where he could provide some value of Ottawa in the future if he gets back to a decent level, if that defense gets back to a decent level. John Klingberg was just an albatross of a player for this Leafs roster. Thankfully, only signed a 1-year deal at $4.1 million, but it's brutal. He's already out for the season, it looks like. Only played 14 games, got 5 points, was a disaster defensively, and it's just sad to see. Once one of my favorite players, but the writing was on the wall, and it's pretty sad that Toronto wasn't able to see it. Oh yeah, the grade is an F. I'm sorry. Now going on to a Leafs signing that was much better, thankfully, and that is the Tyler Bertuzzi deal. Another shorter-term deal, 1 year at $5.5 million, but so far, I think he's been pretty great and pretty underrated. Even though he only has 16 points in 35 games, his playmaking hasn't been great. The grittiness has been great to see from him. He's just getting really snake-bitten. Honestly, he's one of the more snake-bitten players in the entire league right now. His teammates just are not finishing what he's setting up, but that will come eventually, and what he's been able to bring has been solid. I'm going to give this signing an A-. Now going on to the Dmitry Orlov signing, and this one is pretty wild to look back on. $7.75 million for not just 1 year, but 2 years with Carolina, and so far he's just not lived up to the hype with Carolina this season. I thought it was pretty great with Boston when they traded for him at the last deadline. You can see this year, 13 points in 38 games. Defensively has not been all that great. 5-5 offensively, he hasn't been as good as he should be. And even though there is some great quality still of Orlov, decent skating, great puck handling ability, and a solid passer, he's just kind of been at a so-so level. And considering how much Carolina is paying for him for not just this year, but next, he really needs to get to a better level, or else this could be a detriment for Carolina. Right now, I'm going to give this signing a C-. It wouldn't be so bad if it was just that 1-year term, but that 2-year term might hurt them a bit here. Now we go back to the trades here, and one of the biggest ones of the offseason right up there with the Pierre-Luc Dubois deal, and that is the Alex DeBrincat trade. So far for Detroit, it is looking absolutely brilliant. Started off the year at an absolute heater, has gotten back to that level the last couple of weeks. You can see a point per game, 38 points in 38 games. You would love to see it, man. Prime DeBrincat is back, and it's just so much fun to watch. He's been a beauty to watch with Detroit. That power play has been really nice to watch. As for what Ottawa got back, they got Dominik Kubalik, who hasn't really been too much of a fit this year, 10 points in 33 games. Donovan Sabrongo, who doesn't look like much right now. He's playing in the AHL, the ECHL. He still has a lot of time as a future or soon-to-be 22-year-old, but still not looking the greatest. Though Ottawa ended up getting a couple of picks back in the deal, a first-round pick for 2024, and then a 2024 fourth-round pick, which is Detroit's. We'll see if that's able to bring him some value. Obviously, Ottawa didn't have a lot of leverage here, but it is still pretty brutal to watch. As for the deal and the grades itself, I'm going to give Detroit an A+. I mean, how could you not? And I'm going to give Ottawa a C+. Now, with Ottawa losing DeBrincat, they had to go after somebody, and for them, they were able to sign Vladimir Tarasenko, who has been solid, has been good for them. In 31 games, has 24 points. Now, sure, he's been a little bit of a disaster defensively at times, but I think he's one of the lesser offensive players on this Senators team. He's been doing his job and has been doing that pretty solidly, and especially considering his contract situation, only being a one-year deal, he'll be pretty easily able to be traded at this deadline, which hopefully for Ottawa will be able to get them some pretty decent assets back. As for the deal, especially if they're able to get some solid trade assets, I'm going to give this signing a straight B. It's one of the lesser problems on this Ottawa team, that's for sure. Now let's move on to the last big trade of the NHL offseason, and that of course was the Erik Karlsson deal, which landed Pittsburgh the Norris Trophy winner, and it is really turning out interesting so far, with Pittsburgh not really having the greatest first half of the season. We'll see if it turns out better in the second, but it was an absolutely wild trade. For Pittsburgh, they would end up getting Erik Karlsson, Dylan Hammerlick, and a 2026 third-round pick from San Jose. As for Montreal, being a third team in this deal, they ended up getting Nathan Legare, Casey DeSmith, and Jeff Petrie, and a 2025 second-round pick from Pittsburgh as well. Of course, they traded Jeff Petrie, they traded Casey DeSmith for some assets back as well, so Montreal looking pretty good there. And for San Jose, they ended up getting Mike Hoffman, they got Mikael Granlund, who's actually been pretty solid this year, 25 points in 31 games for them, and Jan Ruda, who is the exact opposite. He's been brutal, but a tank commander for the San Jose Sharks, and you always need some of those. They also got a 2024 first-round pick for Pittsburgh, which is top 10 protected. With how Pittsburgh is kind of trending towards right now, maybe it's in the 12 to 17 range, which isn't too bad in this draft. And that is all that she wrote. But, of course, there's a lot of trades after this by Montreal. And for San Jose, they'll likely see trades of Mike Hoffman and especially Mikael Granlund this trade deadline, so some more assets back for them. For the actual trade grades, though, I'm going to give Montreal a straight A. I'm going to give Pittsburgh an A-, and San Jose a B- as of right now. We'll see if Mikael Granlund is able to get them some solid assets back. But for all these teams, it was pretty solid, especially Montreal coming in as the third team. They didn't have to do that, yet they got some pretty good assets back, and I think for a lot of these teams, it was a win-win. A lot of people are saying out there right now that for Pittsburgh, trading for Erik Karlsson was a mistake, but honestly, he's still been one of Pittsburgh's best players, and he is one of the lesser problems on this Pittsburgh team right now. If they didn't trade for him, they'd be in no man's land and would be in contention for a top 5 pick. But those are my grades from this last offseason and how we've seen them turn out so far this year. But let me know in the comments down below, what do you guys agree, what do you guys disagree with, and what would be your grades from this last offseason? Which signings and trades have turned out great, turned out wrong? Let us know all your thoughts down below, and let me know how you guys thought your team did this last offseason. Let me know all your thoughts down below, of course, and share the video with all the hockey fans you guys know online. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell if you guys haven't already for more hockey ranking content just like this. And click on this card as well for my hockey rankings content right in one playlist, folks. Get some popcorn, binge that if you haven't, and I will see you in the next one. Have a great hockey day, and goodbye.